We're on Daf Tzadi Hey, and we're up to my Iser Kal. Let's see if we can first find the place. You see the lines get wider on the bottom, so we're up to line 4, which is approximately 10 lines up from the bottom of the on Tzadi Hey. So now, in order to understand my Iser Kal, we have to go over the Kal V'chomer again. The Kal V'chomer was from Iser Kal to Iser Chomer. And the Iser Kal is the case of a man who's married to Rachel, and then he has a relationship with Leah, her sister. And according to this Shita, from a Kal V'chomer, we're going to derive that he can no longer resume his marriage relationship with Rachel with his original wife. In other words, the relationship that he has now with his wife's sister generates an Iser of Achos Ishto with regard to his wife. He cannot resume his relationship with his wife. And that's derived from a Kal V'chomer. And this case of Achos Ishto, in the context of the Kal V'chomer, is defined as an Iser Kal. I'm sorry. No. I said Kal and I meant Chom. That's not good. Okay. In other words, in a certain case, which is unknown, and that's what we're going to try to figure out what it is, we'll call it X. That's a case of an Iser Kal. And we're going to derive the Iser Chomer of Achos Ishto in a Kal V'chomer from the case of Iser Kal. So what is the case of an Iser Kal? Omer Rav Chizda, Machzir Grushaso Mishenises. A man divorces his wife. She gets married to another man. And then she's divorced from the second husband. And the first husband wants to remarry. He's not allowed to do so. Why? Because once she gets married to a second husband after the gerushin from the first husband, that relationship with her second husband generates an Isur on her first husband, which is called Machzir Grushaso Mishenises. And that's an Isur Kal, because the violation of that Isur only incurs Malchus. It's a regular classic lav, as opposed to Achos Ishto, which is Chomer relatively, because that's an Isur Karetz. So now let's analyze, in the light of Rav Chizda's interpretation, the Kal V'chomer, and how we derive that as a result of, we'll call him Reuven's relationship with Leah, he can no longer go back and resume his relationship, his marriage with Rachel. Now, the key two words in the Kal V'chomer that's brought in the Brisa here is Nesar Ha'oseh. Okay, Nesar Ha'oseh. Let me write that down. Right? Nesar Ha'oseh. I don't know, maybe it's too far away from the camera so you can't see it. Nesar Ha'oseh. Okay. So Reuven divorces his wife, and she gets married to Shimon. As a result of her marriage to Shimon, she can no longer have a marriage relationship with Reuven, meaning if Shimon divorces her, Reuven cannot remarry his divorcee. In the case of a Kohen, he can never marry his divorcee. But in the case of Israel, once she gets married to someone else, to Shimon, then Reuven can no longer marry. So the Gemara says the following. Shimon had a relationship with the Grusha of Reuven. Asra alei dahat. As a result of this marriage to Shimon, an Isa was generated to Reuven. So she is now Grushaso Shenisis. Now what happens? Shimon divorces his wife, the ex of Reuven. We'll give her the name Rachel, if you will. Uba aleha idach. In other words, Reuven now violates the law, and after Shimon delivers the get, Reuven has a relationship with his ex-wife Rachel. Asra alei dahat. As a result of that relationship, again, an illegitimate, illegal one, now she becomes asura on Shimon. Why? Because Shimon gave her a get, gave this Rachel a get, and now Reuven remarried Rachel. And once a man divorces his wife and she gets married to someone else, he can no longer resume that marriage. And the chiddush here is, even if that marriage was not a legitimate marriage, so this is a case of Nesar Ha'oseh. What does it say here? I'm sorry. Of Nesar Ha'oseh. Why? Because Shimon is an Oser. With his marriage to Rachel, he generates an Isur on Reuven. And now Reuven himself becomes Nesar. No, let me go over that one more time. 1 second. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Let's say it this way. Shimon is the Oser. Okay, now I got it. Why? Because when Shimon marries Rachel after a divorce from Reuven, that generates an Isur on Reuven. But now Shimon becomes a Nesar because after Reuven, post-Gerushin of Shimon, remarries Rachel, that generates an Isur on Shimon. So Shimon is the Oser and the Nesar. So we now have a precedent for Nesar Ha'oseh. Nesar Ha'oseh. So let's see how this applies to the case of Achos Ishto. He went ahead and had a relationship with Leah, with his wife's sister. What's Nesar? So if I understand this correctly, who's responsible for the Isser between Reuven and Leah? It's Rachel, his first wife, right? He married Rachel. And now we're going to apply the principle of Nesar HaOser. If Rachel is the Oser, now she becomes a Nesar. Just like in the case of Machzir Gusha, so Shimon was the Oser, and now he becomes the Nesar. It's a little bit strange because he becomes a Nesar because of the Maisa Nesuin of Reuven to Rachel. In our case, Rachel did nothing. So why should she become a Nesar? I mean, it's true she's an Oser, but she's an Oser not actively, but simply as a result of the fact that she's the sister of Leah. Let's see if we could fit our logic into the Gemara's language. I'm hoping we can. The Gemara says, Ma'ala Machzir Gusha. What kind of equation do you have to Machzir Gusha of Nesar HaOser? Shekain Nitma Guf. In other words, when Reuven remarries Rachel illegally, so the guf of Rachel was now violated, was now contaminated. Again, I hate to use these words in English, doesn't sound right to the ears, but it's just a literal translation of nitma gufa. Nitma guf means that there was a sexual act that creates tumah because she had no right to live with her first husband, Reuven, after she married Shimon. So now it makes sense that as a result of nitma gufa, Shimon is now enjoined from marrying Rachel because Rachel, as far as Shimon is concerned, was nitma gufa. She went ahead and married another man. Again, had she married any other man other than her original husband, there would be no nitma gufa, but yet it would be Machzir Gusha Salach HaShenises. But even in this case, where there was an illegal marriage, that's no different than had she been married to anyone else, because the Torah recognizes the validity of that marriage and therefore generates an Isur on Shimon. But what does that have to do with Achos Ishto, which is Lo Nitma Gufo? On the contrary, the only one who had Tumas HaGuf was Leah, not Rachel. Rachel was pure. He writes, "Shekain nitma gufo sharei niskacha v'nivla achrei shenisgarcha mibaylo." Right, she had a kedushin with Reuven after Shimon delivered a get. V'aleh omar hakos v'achrei asher hu tama, after she was contaminated. V'tum asa osrasa al baylo. And once again, that has no parallel or analogy to the case of Achos Ishta. Now the Gemara adds another svara. This is where I got stuck. The Isura Bero. I think what he means by Isura Bero is the following. Rashi doesn't have it, he leaves it out. I think what Isura Barov means that anyone who would have a marriage relationship with Rachel subsequent to the Gerushin that Shimon was Megarish Rachel would generate this Isur. So why should the original Baal be different than anyone else? So if you're looking for reasoning why Shimon could no longer have a marriage relationship with his ex-wife Rachel, I'll give you two reasons for that. First of all, because Nitma Gufa. She had a relationship with her first husband, which was again a Nitma situation. That was an illegal, contaminated relationship. But moreover, even if I would put that on the side, I have another reason why Rachel now becomes prohibited to Shimon, and that's because anybody who would marry Rachel would generate an Isa to Shimon. Now the Gemara gives a third explanation as to why Shimon cannot live with Rachel, because Isur Ola, which means that her prohibition to marry her ex, her original Baal, which is called Masechet Yevamot, is Liolam. There's no heter ever. I mean, just like tragically, if a Kohen divorces his wife, he can never remarry her. So too, if a man divorces his wife, he's not a Kohen, and she gets married to someone else, tragically, he can never remarry her. He could regret that he divorced her from now until doomsday. It won't help him one iota. That's called Isur Ola. So the Isur of Masechet Yevamot has a chumrah. In fact, it has three chumras that go way beyond Achos Ishto when a man has a relationship with Leah during the lifetime of Rachel. Number one, in the case of Achos Ishto, there's no Tumah B'Gufa. Number two, it's only a unique, limited Isur that applies to Achos Ishto, whereas Masechet Yevamot would apply if anyone would marry him. And number three, the Isur of Achos Ishto is not an Isur Olam. It only applies as long as Rachel's alive. I'm reading the Masechet here. Number one, lo nase beishto maise hamatami eskufa. Nothing happened to Rachel here. V'chein, and furthermore, ein ha'isur nase al yidei rov b'nei adam. It's only if he had a relationship with Leah, that's going to generate these. Sharei ein neser sel kein nivala ha'achos lebaila. That Leah had a relationship with her husband Reuven. And furthermore, Isur achosa osal baila dafka b'chayera v'leachar misas ishto muteres b'achosa. So she doesn't have that element of Isur Olam. So the Gemara now has to search for an alternative understanding of the Kal V'chomer, and Rav Chisda's explanation just doesn't hold water because the Kal V'chomer would not withstand a triple attack, a threefold attack. And if this Kal V'chomer is going to be the basis for the derivation of the conclusion that Reuven can no longer resume his relationship with Rachel after he had a relationship with Leah, you're going to have to find a different modus vivendi, a different way of understanding the Kal V'chomer. And that gives us Reish Lakish. Ella Amar Reish Lakish, you know what the Isur Kal is, the basis for this Kal V'chomer, is Yevamot. A Yevamah that was violated. It was Nivala Be'is. Again, we're going to have the same problem of Nitma Gufa, Maisa Begufa. But let's go through the case of Yevamah. Yevamah Laman. Well, what are you talking about? Yevamah to who? What's the case? Elam, if you're going to tell me the Acher, in other words, to somebody from the Shuk, and the Torah says, Lo sia eishes hames achutz lichzar. And now, as a result of a relationship she had with someone other than the brothers, she can no longer have Yibum. Ukid Rav Hanuna. And you're going to rely and stand on the shoulders of the statement, the ruling of Rav Hamnuna, the Amar Rav Hamnuna, Shomeres Yom Shizins Asur Yevama. If a Shomeres Yevama, Shomeres Yevama, goes out and has a relationship with somebody else, she can no longer have a relationship with any of the brothers. And why? Because since the Zikas Yibum, it's like an Ashes Ishu has Nus. So the Gemara says, Ma'aliv. So again, let's talk about Nesar Ha'oser. Nesar Ha'oser means that the Oser to the Shuk are the brothers, we'll call them the Yavam, and now Nesar HaYavam, the Oser becomes Asur because she had a relationship with someone else. And this is a lot closer, says Reish Lakish, to the case of Achos Ishta, because what? No. I don't understand why this is any progress. Again, I understand why it's an Isur Kal, because you're talking about an Isur Lav as opposed to Achos Ishto, which is more Chomer, it's an Isur Karetz. But the mechanism of the Kal Chomer, I don't understand. Let's see if the Gemara will say all three. Ma'ali Yevama Shekei Nitma Beguf. The Isura V'rov B'nei Adam. And also it's an Isur Olam. No, is it not? I don't know. Does the Gemara say it's an Isur Olam? I think, Ruven, you have footnotes? No, who does anybody here have footnotes? What happened here to Isur Olam? Why does the Gemara drop the ball on Isur Olam? Second. Certainly it's an Isur Olam. Maybe it's not an Isur Olam. Oh, yeah, it's not an Isur Olam. The Gemara deliberately omits Isur Olam. I just figured it out. Because what? But we're holding like Rav Hamnuna. So there's no heter v'yibum. But there's chalitza. Maybe that's what it means. Since the brothers, one of the brothers, whichever, can voluntarily give her chalitza, that removes the Isur of Yevam. So it's not an Isur Olam. In that sense, it's very similar to Achos Ishto, where if his wife dies, then the Isur Erva falls away and he can marry her sister. But I assume somebody's going to write that in a footnote. I don't know. But just for my own edification, do any of you gentlemen have footnotes?
So here,
No, I'm asking, do you have a book that has footnotes? I just want to know in the future if I could invoke your help, your assistance. You do have footnotes. Okay, I forgot. I thought I remembered that you had footnotes. Yeah. Go ahead. What does it say?
It says a divorcee who remarries remains forbidden to her first husband forever. The prohibition persists even after the second husband dies. By contrast, a husband is permitted upon the death of his wife to marry the wife's sister. The enduring nature of the divorcee prohibition represents the stringency of this prohibition over the prohibition to cohabit with the sister of one's wife. Because the divorcee prohibition possesses this stringency, it cannot be classified as the more lenient of the two prohibitions. It cannot be classified as the more lenient, two prohibitions. Thus, the Kal Vachomer is refuted. Therefore, it cannot serve to apply the law of the divorcee's second husband to the wife of one who cohabits with the wife's sister. And that's
Ruben,
first.
let me just, I'm sorry if I have to cut you off. I'm interested, everything you said is 100%, and we said it ourselves. But I'm talking about Yevamot. Does he have a footnote on Yevamot?
So on the Yevamot, right. So the Yevamot is forbidden to marry anyone other than a brother of her deceased husband. This prohibition is more lenient than the prohibition to cohabit with the sister of one's wife, in that it is not punished by death or co-race.
Okay, but is it an Isser Olam? Again, I appreciate everything you've been saying, but is there a footnote on the concept of Isser Olam in the case of Yevamot? That's all I was asking.
Vis-a-vis, no, that I don't see.
That you don't see. Okay, so we're going to have to write the script for that. Because again, it's missing in the Gemara, so we're going to have to assume that Yevamot L'shuk is not an Isser Olam because of Chalitza. Okay, fine. I think that's a valid point. I don't know why neither my Gemara nor your Gemara mentions that. All right, let's go on. Ella, says the Gemara, let's interpret Reish Lakish in a different way. Right? We said, Ilema li'acher, Yevamot L'shuk. Now we're offering it's a different case. And what's the case? Yevamot li'acher. Okay, so one of the brothers gave what? What did he give? The Gemara says the Ovid bar Maimer ha. So one of the brothers said Hareyat Mekudeshesli to the Yevamah. One of the brothers. And now another brother has a relationship with her. Ovid bar Maimer Hai Asara alei dahai uba alei idach asra alei dahai. So it means that after, we'll call him Ruvain, did Maimar on the Yevamah, Shimon had a relationship with the Yevamah, and now the halacha is that Ruvain, the original brother who did what's called Maimar, can no longer have a relationship with this Yevamah once she had a relationship with one of the other brothers. And that's called Ba'aleha Idach, meaning after one of the brothers, we called him Ruvain, did a Maimar in the Yevamah, but then Shimon had a relationship with the Yevamah. Asra Dahai, she can no longer have a relationship with the first Yavam Ruvain, who was Makadisha with a Maimar. And this is called an Isser Kal. And why is this called Nesar HaOser? Because Reuven was the Oser as a result of his Maimar. Shimon was enjoined from having a relationship with the Yevamah, and yet he himself, the Oser, that's Reuven, becomes now the Nesar when Shimon has that relationship. And it's an Isakal because the whole business is only D'Rabbanan. I mean, the Torah doesn't recognize Maimar in the case of Yevamah. So the Gemara asks the following question: my area, why did you have to add in the Kal Vachomer Ma b'makom shebo leah b'iser kal, which means bo leah hasheni, that Shimon had a relationship with the Yevamah, and you're coming to teach me that as a result of that relationship, she can no longer have a relationship with Reuven. Afilu avid bonami, maimar. We don't have to wait until Shimon actually has an intimate act with the Yevamah. Even if he just does a maimar, she can no longer go back to the first Yavam, meaning to Reuven. So it means that the Isser is not generated by a Maisa Avera, meaning a Maisa Bia, but rather by the fact that she now has a Zika even to the Sheni, even to Shimon. And if that be the case, then there's no justified analogy to the Achos Ishto situation. Because in the Achos Ishto, we want to say that the Bia, the Maisa that he had, Reuven with Leah, is going to generate an Isser on Rachel, vis-a-vis Rachel. Here, in the case of Shnei Achim, of Yevamot Achim, we're not even talking about a Maisa Isser, we're talking about Maimar. So the Gemara says, and with this we'll wrap it up, Ha lo kash. Hirab Gamliel Diomer ain't mamar achar mam. This Kal V'chomer is based on the Shita Rabbi Gamliel, who holds that there's no such thing as a maimar after a maimar. The Rabbanan recognize the first maimar to generate an Isser on the other achim, but if the second ach wants to do a maimar after the first maimar, that's meaningless. Ella, says the Gemara, afilu nosan la get v'afilu cholatzla. I'll prove to you that this is a whole different and uncomparable to Achos Ishto situation, because here the Isser would apply even if the Yavam Sheni, meaning Shimon, gave her a get or did Chalitza, she can no longer resume a relationship with the first Yavam, meaning the Bala Maimar, the one who said Maimar, that was Reuven, we called it. So the Isser on Reuven is a result of the fact that the Yevamah, who is Zekuka, even to him, and there's no room for comparison to the Isser of Achos Ishta, where it's a Maisa Bia that generates the Isser. Here, even a Chalitza would generate the Isser. This leads us to Ella Omer Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan is going to have a new interpretation of the Kal V'chomer, which in Yirtzeh Hashem B'li Neder will pick up on Yom Rishon. So we're almost at the bottom of Daf Tzadi Hey. Let me take this opportunity to wish you all a good Shabbos and a Chodesh Tov. Thank you so much.